I don't normally talk about my legal profession, but I got a few things to say after a very sleepless week getting our mutual friend Heavy D Sparks out of jail. To be clear, this is not a crime. There is no crime alleged or charged in this matter. This is strictly a civil matter. They sue him potentially $114 million. Think of that. 20 trucks, talking $5 million per truck. There is no basis in rationality. Go to trial, we get those penalties reduced by over 99%, so the doctors win less than 1% of their case.
The King of Diesel was finally put in a cage. On a Tuesday morning in October 2025, Dave Sparks, the man everyone knows as Heavy D, was arrested and booked into the Salt Lake City jail. The larger-than-life star of Diesel Brothers wasn't behind the wheel of a monster truck. He was behind bars. But this wasn't about a new crime. It was the explosive end to a long war, a war that cost him over $840,000 and his freedom. But what if the real enemy wasn't the law? What if the person who put him on the path to prison was one of his own brothers? Forging an empire of steel and smoke. Before the TV shows, the fame, and the millions of followers, Dave Sparks was just a kid in Utah who loved anything with an engine. His story didn't start in a fancy boardroom. It started in the dirt with the roar of a motor. From his very first motorcycle, a 1976 Yamaha YZ80, he was obsessed with pushing machines to their limits. This wasn't just a hobby. It was in his blood. While other kids were focused on sports or video games, Dave was learning the language of steel and smoke. In high school, he wasn't hitting the books for history or math. His real education was in auto mechanics, welding, and fabrication. He was building the foundation for his future empire, piece by piece, with his own two hands. He even tried the normal path. At age 21, he went to college at Weber State University to study mechanics. But it didn't last. After just one semester, he walked away. Why? Because Dave Sparks believed that real knowledge wasn't found in a classroom. It was found in the real world, getting your hands dirty and learning from experience. This decision tells you everything you need to know about him. He was a man who trusted his own gut over any established system. He didn't want to follow the rules. He wanted to make his own. After leaving college, he didn't look for a simple 9-to-5 job. He started working for his uncle's construction business, operating heavy equipment. Soon, that wasn't enough either. He started his own small excavation business, building rock walls and waterfalls. He was building his dream from the ground up, with no shortcuts. And he wasn't doing it alone. In 2008, he hired his very first employee. It was his best friend, a man the world would soon know as Diesel Dave Kiley. This was the beginning of the brotherhood. Together, they started working to build a new dream, a company called Diesel Sellers. Dave's ambition was relentless. He had a vision for something bigger than just a local repair shop. He saw a brand, a lifestyle, an empire built on the power and rebellion of diesel trucks. His entire life was a pattern of rejecting the normal way of doing things. He rejected the formal education system to build his own business. He trusted himself more than any professor or textbook. So is it really a surprise that years later, when another system, the legal system, tried to tell him what to do, he decided to fight back? His rebellion didn't start with a lawsuit. It started the day he decided his own path was the only one worth taking. The Brotherhood of Diesel. The Diesel Brothers weren't just a TV show, they were a phenomenon. Their journey to fame was a perfect story for the modern age. It all started on YouTube. Dave Sparks and his crew, led by his best friend Diesel Dave Kiley, began posting videos of their wild truck builds and crazy stunts. They weren't just building trucks, they were building a brand. Their videos were loud, exciting, and full of personality. They were a group of friends living the dream, and people couldn't get enough. Their big break came when they caught the eye of a true car legend, Jay Leno. After they were featured on his show, Hollywood came calling. The Discovery Channel saw what everyone else saw, a group of guys with amazing chemistry and a rebellious spirit that was pure television gold. And just like that, Diesel Brothers was born. The show followed Heavy D and Diesel Dave as they ran their garage, Sparks Motors, in Utah. Every week, millions of viewers tuned in to watch them turn regular diesel trucks into absolute monsters. But what was the secret to their success? It was the brotherhood. The show sold the idea of a loyal, tight-knit crew of friends who worked hard and played harder. They were the ultimate guys, and their friendship felt real. But there was another key part of their identity, something that defined their brand and would eventually lead to their downfall. It was the culture of rolling coal. Rolling coal is when a modified diesel truck shoots out a huge cloud of thick black smoke from its exhaust. To their fans, it was a symbol of power and a middle finger to authority. It was a visual representation of the Diesel Brothers' entire brand. We do what we want, and we don't care what you think. This rebellious image was carefully crafted. It was the product they were selling. The brotherhood and the rebellion were two sides of the same coin. They sold friendship and defiance, and business was booming. But was this culture the secret to their success, or was it the seed of their own destruction? As their fame grew, so did the smoke from their trucks. And some people in their own community were starting to notice. They were building an empire, but they were also making powerful enemies. The very thing that made them famous was about to put their brotherhood to the ultimate test. The question was, when the pressure was on, would their loyalty be as strong as the steel they welded? The lawsuit that tested loyalty. Every great story needs a villain. For the Diesel Brothers, that villain came in the form of a lawsuit. But this wasn't an attack from a rival company or a jealous competitor. The enemy came from a place they never expected, their own backyard. In 2016, a group called the Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment filed a federal lawsuit against Sparks Motors. These weren't faceless government agents from Washington. They were doctors, local doctors from Utah, who were worried about the air their community was breathing. The doctors accused the Diesel Brothers of breaking the law. They said the crew was violating the Clean Air Act by selling trucks with illegal modifications. Specifically, they were accused of selling and promoting defeat devices, which are used to disable a truck's emissions control systems. This is what allows a truck to roll coal, spewing clouds of black smoke into the air. The doctors weren't just making claims. They had proof. They had actually bought a truck from Sparks Motors themselves and had it tested. What did they find? The results were shocking. The evidence presented in court showed that the truck they purchased was releasing 36 times more pollutants than a normal truck with working emissions controls. 36 times. It was also releasing 21 times the amount of dangerous particulate matter. This wasn't just about a little bit of smoke. The lawsuit claimed this was a serious health risk. For years, the legal battle raged on. The Diesel Brothers fought back, but in March 2020, the judge made a final decision. He ruled against them. The court found that they were in violation of the law and ordered them to pay a massive amount in fines and fees. The total came to more than $850,000. This was a huge blow. The lawsuit had attacked the very heart of their business. The modifications, the smoke, the rebellion, it was all now officially illegal and very expensive. This created a huge problem for Heavy D and his crew. Their defenders would later frame the lawsuit as a money grab by lawyers or a scam by liberals. But it's hard to call a group of local doctors political scammers. These were respected members of the community whose job is to protect people's health. This turned the fight from a simple story of rebels against the government into something much more complicated. Was Heavy D a blue-collar hero fighting against unfair rules? Or was he a polluter who was harming his neighbors and ignoring the warnings of medical experts? The lawsuit was a test, not just of their business, but of their character. And it was a test of their loyalty to each other. With a debt of nearly $1 million hanging over their heads, the Brotherhood was about to face its biggest challenge yet. The ultimate betrayal. This is the moment the Brotherhood broke. Faced with a massive fine, the Diesel brothers had a choice to make. They could stand together, united in their fight against the ruling, or they could save themselves. For Dave Sparks, the choice was clear. He was the leader, the face of the brand. He believed the lawsuit was unfair, and he was not going to back down. He was ready to fight, no matter the cost. But not everyone on his team felt the same way. One of his closest cast members, another man who was a co-defendant in the lawsuit, made a different choice. His name was Keaton Hoskins, also known as the Muscle. Keaton decided he was not going to go down with the ship. He chose to protect himself and his own finances. In a move that shattered the image of the unbreakable Diesel Brothers crew, Keaton paid his share of the fine. He bought his way out of the legal battle, leaving Heavy D to face the consequences alone. This wasn't just a business decision, it was a betrayal. The Brotherhood had a price, and for Keaton, it was a price he was no longer willing to pay. But what makes this story so dramatic is not just what he did, but how he did it. Keaton didn't just quietly pay the fine and walk away. He went on Facebook and made a public announcement. He wanted the world to know what he did and why. In a long post, he admitted everything. He wrote, "I bought myself out of the lawsuit because I know how unfair it is to fight the government and its bureaucracy." He was essentially saying the fight was impossible to win, so he gave up. But then he did something incredible. In the very same post where he admitted to abandoning the fight, he praised Heavy D for continuing it. He wrote that Heavy D never once let in on this, he never said it was right, never agreed to any of it, went through years of battling this. Do you see what he did there? He tried to have it both ways. He was trying to look like the smart, sensible one who knew when to quit, while also making Heavy D look like a brave hero. This public statement was a masterpiece of passive aggression. It was a way of saying, I admire my friend's principles, but I'm not foolish enough to pay for them. He was trying to look both loyal and pragmatic at the same time. But what he really did was expose the deep crack in their friendship. He made Heavy D's lonely battle public. He showed the world that when things got real, the Brotherhood was just a brand. One brother chose to save himself, while the other was left to fight the government all by himself. This was the ultimate betrayal. It was the moment that set Dave Sparks on a direct path to a jail cell. He was no longer part of a team. He was a king without an army, and his kingdom was about to crumble. October 2025, Judgment Day. After Keaton Hoskins abandoned him, Dave Sparks was on his own. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. For years after the 2020 ruling, he simply refused to pay the massive fine. He didn't just ignore the court's decision, he actively defied it. This wasn't just passive resistance anymore. It became a willful and repeated challenge to the authority of the legal system. And the court was keeping a close watch on his every move. The judge in the case, U.S. District Judge Robert J. Shelby, saw that Sparks was not just failing to pay. He was taking steps to move his assets around, making it harder for the court to collect the money he owed. The court had ordered him not to transfer or move any of his property, but evidence showed he was doing it anyway. He transferred vehicles, including a Tesla and a Ram truck, despite being told not to. He was also accused of holding liquidation sales to sell off his property and then failing to deposit the money from those sales into a required account. On top of all that, he was not submitting the financial records the court demanded. To the court, this was a clear pattern of disrespect. Sparks wasn't just a man who couldn't pay his debt. He was a man who was actively trying to get around the law. Judge Shelby called his explanations unconvincing and concluded that he had repeatedly and willfully violated court orders. The judge's patience had finally run out. On October 2, 2025, Judge Shelby issued an official arrest warrant for Dave Sparks. He was now a wanted man. 5 days later, on the morning of October 7, 2025, the law caught up with him. U.S. Marshals arrested Heavy D in Salt Lake City and took him to jail. The man who had built an empire on freedom and rebellion was now locked in a cell. But this was a special kind of jail time. He wasn't arrested for a new crime. He was being held in civil contempt of court. This meant there was no standard bail or bond he could pay to get out. There was only one way he could be released. He had to do what the court had been telling him to do for years. He had to pay the full $843,602 and finally comply with all of the court's orders. His jailing was the direct result of the path he chose after his partner left him. Instead of reevaluating his fight, he became even more defiant. He thought he was above the law, but on that October morning, he learned a hard lesson. The judge made it clear that Heavy D controlled his own fate. The keys to his cell were in his own hands. All he had to do was give up the fight and pay the price. For a man who had built his entire life on never giving in, this was the ultimate defeat. A trail of broken bridges. The feud with Keaton Hoskins wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a larger pattern. While Dave Sparks was building his public image as a fun-loving, blue-collar hero, a different reputation was growing behind the scenes. A look at online comments and stories from others in his industry paints a picture of a man who could be difficult, arrogant, and willing to do anything for views and money. Many people who have interacted with him or watched his career closely have described him as scammy and a sellout. Some feel that he and his whole crew are fake, putting on a show for the cameras while doing shady things to make a quick buck. One person who claimed to be a family friend said that as soon as Dave got older, his motto became, "Do anything for money." This suggests that for him, business and brand always came first, even before friendships or principles. This reputation extends to his professional work as well. Another off-road recovery expert from Moab, Utah, told a story about how an unnamed YouTuber, believed to be Heavy D, came in and tried to take over a delicate recovery job. This expert claimed that Heavy D's crew was known for coming in with their fancy equipment and destroying the land just to create drama and get exciting footage for their videos. It suggests a willingness to be reckless and disrespectful to others in his field, all for the sake of content. Some have even said he is willing to risk his crew's lives for clicks. His legal troubles also go beyond the big environmental lawsuit. At one point, his clothing company, Diesel Power Gear, was sued by the famous Italian fashion brand Diesel for trademark infringement. The court agreed that the names and logos were too similar and were causing confusion. The Diesel brothers were ordered to stop selling the merchandise, but they reportedly ignored the warnings and kept selling it anyway. In the end, a judge found that their infringement was willful and ordered them to pay millions of dollars in damages. All of these stories paint a consistent picture. They show a man with what has been described as a public and somewhat antagonistic online persona. He seems to have a pattern of pushing boundaries, breaking rules, and creating conflict, whether it's with environmental laws, trademark laws, or other professionals in his industry. When you look at this trail of broken bridges, the feud with Keaton Hoskins starts to make more sense. It wasn't a random betrayal that came out of nowhere. It was the inevitable result of Heavy D's confrontational business style finally being turned on one of his own. The same attitude that created enemies outside his circle eventually created an enemy within it. After 3 days behind bars, Dave Sparks was released. His lawyer argued in court that the whole thing was just a paperwork dispute, and the judge ordered his immediate release. Heavy D himself came out swinging, claiming in a video that he had been unfairly targeted by a group that wanted to drag his name through the mud. But getting out of jail didn't solve his problems. The nearly $1 million debt still hangs over his head, and the legal battle is far from over. But the deepest damage isn't financial. It's the brotherhood, the very foundation of his empire, that lies in ruins. While Heavy D has broken his silence, the silence from his former brothers, especially Keaton Hoskins, speaks much louder. The defiant spirit that built his kingdom of steel and smoke ultimately became the architect of his cage, leaving everyone to wonder if an empire built on rebellion can ever be rebuilt once its foundation of trust has turned to dust.